Everybody's
Ready?
good?
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Robert Hoatzon, R-O-B-E-R-T-H-O-A-T-S-O-N. To my left is Carol, C-A-R-O-L, Dupre, capital D, small u, capital P-R-E, accent aigu.
Thank you.
Or forward slash.
Something like that, yeah.
You may have noticed that the last two times we were here, we spent talking about several victims of clergy sexual abuse and several priests from the Rochester Diocese. And we said at that time that probably it was the tip of the iceberg. Well, now we have more of the iceberg being revealed. Thomas J. Valenti and Eric Villoria, both removed recently by Bishop Salvatore Matano because of credible allegations of sexual abuse or sexual misconduct. What is interesting about these cases is a couple of things. First, Father Villoria has been removed because he evidently was sexually inappropriate with an adult. And vulnerable adults is a major aspect of this whole clergy sexual abuse issue. How many other vulnerable adults like myself at the age of 18 who was sexually abused in a religious order have not been able to have a voice, have not been able to speak their truth because, well, they were over the age of 18 and really had no recourse. So we are happy that Bishop Matano has removed a priest who has been accused of misconduct with a vulnerable adult. And that's a very important term, vulnerable adult. How many women in particular have been counseled by priests in rectory parlors, for example, about their marriages or about life in general and have been sexually abused but have never ever been able to speak about it? So vulnerable adults are a population that we hope now will feel courageous, because the courageous person who turned in Father Eric Villoria should be applauded and should feel that that person should come forward with other vulnerable adults. Now, in terms of Father Thomas J. Valenti, we know that he was at Blessed Sacrament in Rochester, St. Louis in Pittsford. We know that he was at St. Mary of the Lake in Ontario, where, as a deacon, evidently, he began his sexual abusing. But there is a gap in his priesthood. 17-year gap. 1997 to 2014, when he was not here in the Diocese of Rochester. We know he was at a parish in Yonkers, New York, in the New York Archdiocese, at Notre Dame Parish in Manhattan, and he was the Columbia University football chaplain in Manhattan. Was Father Valenti sent to the New York Archdiocese because of allegations? So we're here, Bishop Matano, to ask you, take the key to the secret files, open them up and make them available to the good people of the Diocese of Rochester and the general public, because unless you do that, we will never know the truth about Father Valenti and about other priests. We know that the Attorney General has subpoenaed records, but we also know that we usually never ever get those records unless raids take place. Where there have been successful raids, we have gotten much more information about clergy sexual abuse. And that's what we're encouraging the Attorney General to do, is to take as much information as you can from these dioceses and then analyze them yourselves. Because we believe we have never ever, and possibly will never ever, get the entire story of Father Valenti or perhaps Father Villoria or anyone else. What other parishes was Father Valoria in, and were vulnerable adults at risk in those parishes or those institutions as well? Father Valenti spent some time at I believe it was called Beckett Hall, which is a hall, which a building or a facility in which young men discern vocations to the priesthood. What possibly could have gone on there? Innocent, probably young men coming to serve God or to find out if serving God is what they've been called to do. And here we now know was a predator in their midst. What about Ithaca College, the chaplaincy there, where he also worked with the football team, evidently? It's clear that the information we have is not complete. Why was Father Valenti transferred from place to place to place to place, and perhaps Father Valoria the same thing? What's the story, Bishop Matano? We need to know that. We know that every diocese has a secret file, and the bishop, by canon law, church law, is the one to have the key to that file. Well, it's now time to be completely transparent, open, and honest. Release all the files and be as transparent as you can be. Carol would like to say a few words.
Yeah. In regard to those secret files, I know that what happened to me was reported to the Catholic Church, to the Diocese of Rochester, and yet they claimed to have nothing received. And there was another person in my town that was abused at the same time, and her mom also reported that abuse, and nothing was done about it either. And I would really like to have those opened up. I've submitted my experience to the Attorney General of the state of New York in the hopes that they can reveal the secret files, because I've spent my whole life feeling that sense of frustration that I wasn't believed and I wasn't cared about in that circumstance. I grew up in a very small town in Wayne County, and interestingly enough, one of the people who was related to the other person who was abused called our church the punishment parish, because we seemed to get the leftovers of the troublemakers of the people who had had a bad experience in another church, and we would get them in our little town. I totally am open and agreeing to getting these things revealed. On a personal level, I have to tell you that it's been one of the healthiest experiences I've had in a long time, to be able to talk about something that has been buried for decades in my case. And I would just welcome anybody else who's had that kind of experience. A lot of deep-seated psychological issues that I've had to face in my life, I'm discovering, come from this horrible experience that I had. But there's also a healing in talking about it. And I once again want to say, if you've had an experience, I hope you'll come forth and talk about it, because it wasn't your fault.
You said you spoke with the AG. When was that? Or you reported?
I reported it, yes. I was advised to report it individually, and I did it online and received a verification that they received my information.
And how long ago was that? Was that over the summer?
No, that was just recently, within the last month.
Have you heard back from their other?
Just that they have confirmed that they received the information.
Did he give you any sort of indication on where the subpoenas, and given the subpoenas to the local diocese, where that stands, that investigation stands?
No. You haven't heard anything?
No.
And I haven't heard anything?
No. No. One thing I wanted to say that came out very dramatically with the Pennsylvania grand jury report was the fact of priests being moved around. Okay, I'm asking Bishop Matano and Cardinal Dolan now to work together to find out why Father Valenti was allowed to stay for 17 years outside this diocese and in the New York Archdiocese. You'll notice that, for example, in many years ago, the Albany Diocese traded a priest with the Paterson, New Jersey Diocese, and we know that. One was a pedophile in New Jersey, one was a pedophile in Albany. So were they really exchanging their own problems and just continuing the process of putting kids at risk? So that's another thing we want these two bishops to work together to resolve.
Do you know how many victims that Mitch represents are going to put in the independent program that's set up at the church to allow survivors to get a financial
I don't know
compensation?
that number, no.
Does he represent clients who are going to go that route?
I don't know that either, yeah. I'm guessing yes, but I'm not sure, yeah. But you can give him a call.
Can you talk about your experience with sexual abuse as a child? How old were you and what happened?
My sexual abuse began as a child by my parish priest and the parish custodian. As around 10 years old, I was in a parish in West Orange, New Jersey, St. Joseph's Parish, and my parish priests sexually abused me on a little trip to get ice cream and a hamburger. And the parish custodian took myself into the custodian's room and seriously sodomized me. So that's where it began. Then, when I entered the religious life, the Irish Christian Brothers, at the age of 18, I was abused by 3 different men in that religious order. So that's I was abused from childhood into early adulthood.
How has that impacted your life growing up?
Well, it's ironic that I would be abused as a child and then enter religious life, and then the priesthood. You know, I was 23 years a Christian brother and 14 years a priest. And I was fired by my bishop when I started to, when I testified before the New York State Legislature and called for the resignation of any bishop who has covered up sex abuse. I was called in and then told my language was too over the top by calling for resignations, and I was fired. So in 2011, I petitioned Pope Benedict to get me out, and I was out in record time. 9 months it took.
Is that why you went into what you're doing now?
Yeah, exactly. Sure.
Maybe you're helping to assist.
Sure. Around 2003, 2 of my former students from a school in Boston where I taught, and I had whistleblown a priest who was at that school, Catholic Memorial High School in West Roxbury, Massachusetts, which is a section of the city of Boston. I suspected in 1981 when I was there, I was the football moderator, the chaplain, and I thought that this priest who was coming around the school with a camera and going into the locker room was creepy. So I went to the headmaster and I said, we've got to get rid of this guy. And they said, oh, no, he's a wonderful man. He actually was the 3rd highest ranking member of the Archdiocese of Boston at the time. He was the Vice Chancellor, Monsignor Frederick Ryan. Well, I suspected that he was abusing some of the kids, and he would take the football captains out to dinner and then back to his residence. And in his residence, in the Chancery headquarters of the Archdiocese of Boston, one whole wall of his suite of rooms had pictures of Catholic Memorial boys in various stages of undress. I never saw it, but I was told this by the kids. So I was blown off by the headmaster. He was a wonderful man. He did weddings and funerals and was just a great supporter of the school. Well, skip ahead 20 years. And I get a call from Boston. I'm a priest at the time. I'm directing 2 schools in the inner city of Newark, New Jersey. And a friend calls me from Boston, and says, have you heard the news? And I said, what news? I said, don't tell me Fred Ryan. She said, yes, that's the priest. And I said, is it Gary? She said, yeah. How did you know? I said, he was one of the kids I thought he might be abusing. So I got a hold of Gary, and I apologized to him. And I said, I'm sorry for not screaming more loudly in 1981. But I said, I'll come to Boston and help you each and every day off that I have, you know, as a priest. Would you like that? And he said, yes. And I said, well, let me ask you a question, Gary. Have you heard from David? He said, boy, that's funny, Bob. I'm sitting outside David's room, David's house right now. David was the other kid I thought may have been abused by this guy. So those 2 men asking me to help them was the start of Road to Recovery, this group that I now do, and we've helped over 5,000 victims and their families ever since. So it was my former students who really got me going.
You started that in the 80s?
No, in 2003. And then we were finally incorporated in 05. Anything else?
Are you both still enrolled with the Catholic Church?
No,
No.
not at all. No, you know, I like to say this one thing. I'm a mom and I'm a grandmother. And when they did something wrong, what got me even more upset was when they denied it or covered it up. And I think if you're a parent, you understand what I'm talking about. I really have to say shame on you for covering this stuff up. If we're seeing the tip of the iceberg, I can assure you there's a whole lot more under there, and they might as well just let it be done and get this thing exposed and get it out rather than piecemeal. It's not accomplishing anything, and it isn't helping anyone else that's been through this experience.
Carol, can we get your name?
Carol, C-A-R-O-L, Dupre, capital D, small u, capital P-R-E, accent aigu.
What's the next step now? You said you're going to talk to Cardinal Dolan.
Not I. We're hoping that Bishop Matano and Cardinal Dolan will now work to find out why Father Valenti was allowed to stay in the New York Archdiocese for 17 years when he's a priest of the Diocese of Rochester. And why was he sent there in the first place? And what happened? Will they go to St. John's Parish in Yonkers and Notre Dame in Manhattan and tell those people that this priest was here for several years?
So do you plan now on reaching out to the Bishop Matano? Are you going to reach out to him?
This is how we're doing it.
Yep.
Yeah, because we're not listened to otherwise, except through the media. Yeah.
That's why we need you.
Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you.
All right.
We'll unwind.